an episode about Greenland, which turned out to be easier said than done. Greenland is a more complicated place than I guess I had realized. Its story is complicated. Its relationship with Denmark has been very, very interesting. And we're going to tell you as much of that as we possibly can. We're going to take you back to the Vikings. We're going to introduce you to a musician, a contemporary musician living in the U.S. now, but a person who grew up in Greenland. He's going to sing you a beautiful song. And then he's going to tell you in a very heartbreaking way what the current crisis, and that's what it is, what the current crisis is doing to the people back home. So a lot of that still to come. Get ready to learn more about Greenland than you ever thought possible. That's by an artist named Julie Bertelsen, who is a Greenlandic and Danish musical performer. This is a show about Greenland, and one of the things we discovered getting ready for it is that Greenland produces quite a bit of music, quite a bit of very interesting music and very diverse music, too. That's not what we're going to be talking about today, but we want to tell you a little bit about how we got here and how Greenland became Greenland. And to help us do that is Elizabeth Buchanan, a polar geopolitics expert and the author most recently of So, You Want to Own Greenland, Lessons from the Vikings to Trump. First of all, welcome to our show. Welcome to our conversation. And thanks for writing this book.
Thanks, guys.
Yes, we should say you're in Australia right now. So, yeah. Well, maybe we should start a little bit with the actual contours of Greenland. I think people might, see it on a Mercator map and think about how big it is. And it is big. It's the world's largest island. And it has also this, almost microscopic population relative to its size, 57,000 people. Anything else you want us to know about the just general?
Yeah, so I think before we jump into anything on Greenland, and for listeners that are kind of perplexed by the issue at the moment, simply pull up a map. I think everything kind of starts at the basic 101 of geography, and that's at the heart of every political matter as well, no matter the advances in technology, no matter who's the goodies or the baddies or any ideological issue. So Greenland is located smack bang at the heart of the North Atlantic. Now, the first thing to take away beyond the sheer size is often maps will show it completely covered in ice. And I think that's a really important thing because it just shows how desolate and barren this is. This is like trying to claim a bunch of rocks, essentially. It's what's under the ice pack, the resources that matter. You talk of a small population, 100%. We're at 57,000 people, the Inuit, these indigenous peoples of Greenland. And in my book, I chart, they've got centuries on whatever designs Washington might have for that island. But the key point is locate it with a map and you will see, perplexingly, it is very much not in Europe. It is absolutely, and this is the facts of the matter. Let's take the politics out of it for a second. The facts are this is a North American landmass. It is in the Western Hemisphere. Geography doesn't change when the White House leadership changes. So I think that is a really important point to highlight. And beyond the geography of where Greenland is, that tells us something about why people at the moment are trying to scrap and fight over it. But it also underscores a really sort of pervasive domestic issue between Greenland and Denmark. So Kingdom of Denmark, obviously Greenland makes up 95% of the Kingdom of Denmark. Again, the sheer size of it.
Yeah.
So you've got, and you don't want to piss off the Danes, but the domestic issue that is bubbling away is the fact that the Danish people are by and large good humans, and they are essentially still operating a colony when it comes to Greenland. There's various different instruments we can talk about in terms of the Danish constitution that allow for Greenlandic independence. I'm happy to go into that. But the fact of the matter is, modern day Danes have for a while either put blinkers on to not talk about the Greenlandic issue. It will go away. And what this new Trump iteration of interest in quote unquote owning or taking Greenland has done is it's actually fractured the Danish population as well. And we don't hear enough about that, to be fair, in our political discourse. We seem to be focused on European leaders coming together and kind of aghast at the idea of Trump taking part of Europe. But let's talk about, the domestic sentiment in Denmark, which is it is time to let Greenland have independence. And Trump's designs are certainly hastening that discussion as well.
Although you say in the book, we're kind of getting ahead of where I thought we would be in the conversation, but that's okay. You say in the book that another way of looking at that is that I think the phrase you use is jumping through hoops, that in fact there are enough hoops that Greenland would have to jump through in its quest for independence from Denmark that you almost wonder whether the whole thing is built to kind of stall out at a certain point.
100%, and that's the key point, right? And despite the fact that we're talking about lovely Scandinavians and they're fervent defenders of the rules-based order and liberal democracy, fact of the matter is, again, go back to the map. If you are in the Danish position and you are looking at the potential for 95% of your kingdom mass by landmass or area to be essentially sawn off, and with it goes all of the seabed resources that the Danes claim via Greenland up into the Arctic Ocean. The basic strategic positioning of that island as a choke point for any future, 50, 100 years sea lanes of communication through the Arctic. So there is no sane Danish leader that is going to sign off on, essentially carving off your good leg. And that's a problem because I think the way to deal with that issue for Denmark simply has been to avoid getting to the point of having to make that choice.
Right. And I mean,
57,000 people.
Yeah. And I think that is exacerbated by the fact that, yes, 80% of the country, of the landmass, is covered in ice, but it's ice that's melting. And it's just in the same sense that a bad investment anywhere in the world right now might be a property right very close to the ocean as oceans are rising. This thing might be tempting in the kind of the other way, right? I mean, it's like, well, some of the things
you
that are
need the ice to melt to unlock some of the benefits, right? But also, let's unpack another part of this ice melt discussion about the opening up of Greenland and the potential to exploit the resources underneath the ice. Well, whichever way Greenland goes, independence, sure, it needs economic support from, a father figure, and that will have to be the US. At the moment, it's a block grant from the Danes, but the melting of the ice is also causing generational hardship for the Greenlandic people themselves. These are centuries of families that have, and in the book I talk about the Viking footprint, nomadically moved throughout Greenland based on the seasons for fishing. A lot of the export industry is still, wildlife fishing. These are getting hugely these are curtailed by the impacts of the melting ice mass. So people's livelihood in a domestic sense, at that really low 57,000 people per capita, this is a domestic issue that is then also it is pushing deeper the societal issues that Greenland has with alcoholism and drug use in the younger population, because there's simply no work, there's no future, there's no prosperity. So it's such a wicked problem of so many driving forces of the Greenland issue. It's not simply a case of Trump woke up one morning, had a can of Coke and was like, hell, I'm going to take that, thank you. That's simplistic. And I think the problem we have internationally, and I'm saying this as an Australian who's a massive nerd in like polar regions, but if we focus on the whims of what Trump says or Trump tweets or Trump thinks or Trump pushes through or the White House does, we're missing kind of the wood for the trees, because it is very likely that you are going to have a groundswell in Greenland who say, actually, yeah, we do really want independence, and this seems like the quickest pathway, because he won't say whether it's $10,000 or $100,000 per person, but that looks kind of enticing.
Absolutely. I think what we're going to do is grab a quick break here. I want to come back and reset a little bit. The history that you depict in your book is really, really fascinating. We have actually already done an entire show about the Vikings not all that long ago, but I still think it's important to talk about how difficult Greenland has been for the people who thought that they could tame it, settle it, live there. And I think that's a conversation worth having. So let's grab a quick break and we'll come back. We'll talk about that.
Every day we repeat, we are getting stronger. Let's raise a fist up to the sky. We have the power to give all we have. With the northern lights above us, we are the Arctic. We are the Arctic.
Det var tider, og det var bare så fedt. Tænker tilbage på disse dage, hvor der var originalitet i Nuuk City. Det var der, det hele begyndte i 1984, hvor brødrene de mødte Def Deal.
That's the Greenlandic hip-hop group Nuuk Posse. We're talking right now with Elizabeth Buchanan, a polar geopolitics expert and the author most recently of So You Want to Own Greenland? Lessons from the Vikings to Trump. So let's take a little bit of time and peel away some of the layers of that title there. So yeah, the first group of people who think they're going to emigrate to Greenland and make a life there are coming from Iceland. It's Eric the Red and then his son Leif Erikson. Leif sets sail with, I think, about 25 ships, roughly half of which make it to Greenland at all. Some of them capsize, some of them are just sort of turned back by the weather. And so when they get there, what do we know about what they found and how they tried to live in this, very, very harsh and unforgiving place?
So, yes, you had our Viking friend Eric basically committed, the stories tell us, and obviously we're going on, quite a bit of hearsay and the Norse mythology, but commits the sin of murder, apparently multiple times, very Viking-esque of him, true to form, and is sent away, basically and this is what the thread that I run through my book, which I find really interesting, is that businessman mentality, right? From Eric to Trump, of getting there and realizing this was an quote unquote unclaimed piece of rock, seemed to have wildlife, had great fisheries, could sustain some form of life form, could plant his flag, could be his, but he needed people. He needed people to work the land, to have the babies, to run society. So instead of calling it Iceland, which would make much more sense, because in actual fact, Iceland today is greener than Greenland, and Anyway, so a whiff of marketing there comes back and says to the people in Iceland and in Norway through these regions, I've got this great new development proposal, essentially. Pack your things, come follow, let's go. As you say, 50% of those Viking ships actually make it to shore. This is the perilous environment. But once they land, we know, and this is the beauty of like archaeology and whatnot, we know that some settlements were established kind of in the southwest area and some parts of the southeast. So the northern parts of Greenland have always remained quite, isolated. They're just extremely difficult terrain. Created small colonies, township. We know that they were met with the Greenlandic Inuit. And much like, Vikings, they became the first colonizers, right, of Greenland. stories are mixed as to whether or not it was all-out war between the Inuit people and the Vikings. Some stories also speak of a truce and an agreement just to kind of operate and exist outside of each other's orbits. We then fast forward to, well, you could say in the last kind of 20 years, when they've done a lot of archaeology work trying to figure out what happened to the Vikings, because that's the kind of sexy story. So essentially, the Norwegian leadership sent this, Lutheran priest, as religion always comes into the fray here, right, for a means of control of peoples and populations, let's be honest. So they don't hear anything. There's no news from the colonies there in Greenland. So they send by boat Hans, and he is a Lutheran minister. Over 90% of modern day Greenlandic people are actually Lutheran today. So there's still that strong kind of reach there of the religious beliefs. He arrived expecting to find these towns, and they were empty. So in many ways, it was and instead he just found the Inuit people. There was little evidence that there was bloodshed. There was a war, that the Vikings had all been taken out by the traditional custodians of Greenland, the Inuit. And even today, when they are finding, there's no mass graves, for example, when they are finding remains, it is really interesting, thanks to science, that we can tell that the shift of the Vikings in terms of what they could eat in the land that they were living off. These are, a group of people that are used to heavy meat diets, right? Less so on the fisheries. And this is a point my book unpacks, which is you need to know Greenland. So, of course, the Inuit people are very nomadic still today and live off the land. So they know that it's a fisheries-heavy diet. So we can see science tells us that the bone structures changed over time for the Viking people. So they clearly tried to have livestock. It didn't work because they couldn't sustain it in those conditions. Crops failed.
Yeah,
so,
and I think it's worth noting that geologically, the 14th century, it got colder. We know that it got considerably colder. We should also point out that one of the Vikings were actually fairly sophisticated for their time about trade, and one thing they'd figured out is that they had white gold. The white gold was the ivory from walrus tusks. They appear to have overfished or over-walrused that population, so that they had to go further north to find more walruses to sell out there on the international markets to sell those tusks. Yeah. Go ahead.
But also coming the other way, like this is a 15th, 16th century example of globalization, right? This is nothing new.
Yeah.
So you had the African and the Silk Road area global ivory trade start to hit the market, and that was easier to get to your European customer than a weeks-long mission up to Greenland. So they also lost their export market. So I landed on. I landed on in the book when it comes to like the curious case of what happened to the Vikings was simply they died out. And I do stand by that. Some recent research has argued that they simply built a flotilla of longboats and went back to the mainland, went back throughout the Nordics. But none of the archives, indicate an arrival of a mass of people, which is something that, at the time they would have journaled or they would have actually talked about. And also, trees aren't a thing in Greenland. It's quite difficult to find the wood supply.
I want to pause over a couple of things. First of all, I should say that Lutheran evangelist, Hans Egede. His last name is Egede, and I noticed today that the current prime minister and a former prime minister addressed the world about the current crisis. And the former prime minister is named Muta Egede. So I'm thinking maybe
they're descendants. Yeah. So there's a descendancy there. What's interesting is about three years ago, it wouldn't be more than 5 years, but let's say 3 years ago, a statue memorial of Hans, who is very much still viewed by many people in Greenland as like the founding father, right? He came
in the 1700s. He came, right?
Yes, he's very much viewed as a founding father. But what's happened in the last few years is there's been a break, and this is happening internationally. This isn't just a Greenland story, but you've got millennials and the new generations that are coming up and going, well, he was actually just another form of colonizer, and we want to break away from that. So his statue, which is in the middle of Nuuk, a famous one, your readers can, your listeners can look it up, was defaced, and it was a huge kind of inflection point for the Greenlandic people, because I think it really kicked off an internal discussion, and especially a domestic political one, about the future that they want for their country. And his hands are all through it, all through the country. And yes, you rightly point out that leadership over the last century or so has had some ties to him or his family or his descendants. Yeah.
Well, and so, Elizabeth, another thing I just want to point out before we get too far away from it is that how does Denmark get involved? Well, one of the ways Denmark gets involved is at the end of near the end of the Napoleonic Wars. I think it's 1814. There's the Treaty of Kiel, and it's funny too that President Trump was on a group text apparently with the Prime Minister of Norway and one other nation, because Norway kind of wasn't a nation at the time, and it was more, at least in that treaty, was treated kind of like Alsace-Lorraine or something. It was like they said to Sweden, "Okay, we'll give you Norway. We're going to keep Greenland and some other stuff." But anyway, sort of at the end of this massive European war, somehow or other Denmark wound up with the keys to the car for Greenland as part of a bargain they struck with Sweden.
But Norway also, kicked off a stink about that, and went through with Denmark to try to utilize the international norms and the structures that we have there, right, with international court of justice, to say, well, actually, we claim, that's our claim, this is our landmass. The findings came back that it was not, like, it was Danish, and the Danish kingdom could maintain its claim to Greenland, and Norway simply said, okay, we agree. So there is so much precedent with the Greenland issue that it hasn't appeared out of nowhere overnight. It has been horse traded before. And something that's come up recently has been, this idea that the US needs to abide by this fine print in a treaty when it purchased the US now Virgin Islands from Denmark. And it said it would not make claim, and it would recognize claim to the Danish claim to Greenland. And what's fascinating about that is something that isn't really a thread that's not pulled on enough, but I'm a super nerd on this, so I do. But it just highlights the fact that the Danes remain terrified of a US control or bid to take Greenland. And this is not something that's just a Trump phenomenon. This is baked into this agreement, right, from the US Virgin Islands purchase, but it's also baked into the 1951 Defense Treaty. I've been through, weeks of archives, so your listeners don't have to, but the letters between Roosevelt and the Danish king when he was under Nazi occupation, you can read and you can feel the panic and the strategic maneuvering of Washington to say, we're doing this for your own good. We can't have another European power take control of Greenland, so we will. So it's been a tug of war, I think, for centuries, Greenland. And I love these opportunities to talk with you, because I think it's so important that we take the time to understand the ebbs and flows of the history here.
So we've only got a couple of minutes left here, Elizabeth Buchanan, and I want to kind of talk you through part of the ending of your book, because one of the things that you do is you run some scenarios. But yes. We don't have time to go through all the scenarios, but what is
buy the book?
Yeah, buy the book. There's all kinds of things. There's all these Camp Century and all these tunnels, and there's Project Iceworm that we don't have time to tell you about. So you're gonna have to buy the book and find out about all that. But looking at this whole situation, looking at the history, you know an awful lot about the current geopolitics of Denmark and Greenland, and you can see what's happening here in the U.S. Does history and your current knowledge give you an opportunity to think about this in a certain way? How does this all work out in your best guess?
I first of all look at what has surprised me, or what changes I want to inject into my forecasting over this issue. And the key one over the last 2 weeks has been this sense of pace. So that is what has thrown me as an analyst of this issue. And that is the sheer pace, not only at which the Trump administration, the US has pushed for the Greenlandic issue to be front and center of international discourse. There's plenty of ways it could have been done much more quietly. Day in, day out, we have jets of private investors going in and out of Nuuk. That is happening. So the internationalization, the pace at which it's become an international phenomenon, has been quite purposeful, in my opinion. And that is to do two things. That is to bring in the alternative world order that has been built between China, Russia, and India, to bring in their perspectives, to show that might is right. And that's a bit of a terrifying statement, because I don't think we're ready. We, Western liberal democracies, are ready for what that means. I urge all listeners to dig up the Canadian Carney's speech at Davos. He basically, says that the current extant rules-based order has ended, which I agree with. I just thought the pace it would die slowly. There'd be more things that would happen, but I think it's definitely happened quicker. I think that the pace has also panicked European leaders. So the way in which these broadly unified statements have come out in defence of the Kingdom of Denmark have been fascinating. The first one that came out didn't have the Finnish ink on it, and that's interesting. It's also important because Finland has over 90% of its natural LNG gas coming from the US now. Remember, since the war in Ukraine, European states have left the Russian LNG market for the US LNG market. They're over 60% reliant. So Europe has no cards. So Finland's played an interesting game there, but they're also used to dealing with bullies, just through their future. So the pace at which the European leaders have come together and so vocally they're not sitting on the fence is interesting. Again, they have no cards. I think it will, and it over the next few days will expose the rot in Europe in terms of what they have not invested in their own defence. They have no strategic autonomy. And if I was to forecast on what that means for Greenland, I would say that Europe will have one or two strongly worded statements to come. But the cost for maintaining US privilege and US partnership will be the Kingdom of Denmark. And I do think European leaders know that. Greenland will, I'm hopeful, hold a referendum for independence. Problem is, how are they going to pay to be independent? How are they going to sustain themselves independently? As much as we can look at the polls and have a takeaway that they do not want to be part of America, polls change, people's preferences change, and a pragmatic parent or pragmatic national that's faced with a rather large amount of money to look after your future generation, but also to have confirmed work and employment and new industries, this could sway things. I think Greenland, in some form or another, will be associated with the United States of America by the end of this year.
We are going to have to wrap it up here, Elizabeth Buchanan. I'm really sorry.
Okay.
But yes, thank you so much for your time. Polar geopolitics expert, author of So You Want to Own Greenland, Lessons from the Vikings to Trump. People should check it out. Thank you so much for your time. We're going to end, our final segment will be a musician who grew up in Greenland. He's going to sing you a song, and he's going to break your heart when he talks about what this is doing to the people he grew up with. So, time for a few thank yous. Actually, really only one thank you. We usually have a longer list of people to thank, but Jonathan McNichol has taken over this whole thing as both technical producer and producer of the episode. Thanks also to Robin Doyen-Aiken, who's given us a lot of help and advice today. She's our boss. One of the things you might have noticed is that already on the show we have used a lot of music by musicians from Greenland and musicians in Greenland. You heard Nuuk Posse, a hip hop group, just a few minutes ago. But we thought, and first of all, it's very interesting the degree to which in an island with the world's largest island with a population of 57,000 people, a lot of really interesting music has come out of it. And so we thought we would spend a little time with somebody whose musical formation was in Greenland, although he lives closer to us right now. And that is Simon Linge, a Greenlandic Danish singer-songwriter. We should say that we're pre-recording this for complicated logistical reasons, but on the day that we hope and believe this will air, it will be his birthday. Happy birthday, Simon Linge. I should also say that I became his 81st fan on the platform Tidal earlier today. Simon, I just want to say as we begin, I'm really enjoying your music a lot. You're very, very talented, and you write beautiful and interesting songs, and I don't know why I didn't know who you were already, but I hope a lot of people do find out a little bit more about you today.
Thank you.
So maybe just give us a little bit of your life story. You're born in Denmark, but you grew up in a very small village, as I understand it, in Greenland. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So my mother is Danish and my father is Greenlandic, Inuk, which is a very common combination in Greenland, since Greenland has been a part of Denmark for so long, and a lot of Greenlandic people go to Denmark to go to school, which my dad did, and met my mom. So I was born in a western Jutland in Denmark called Holstebro, a town called Holstebro, and then moved to Greenland when I was 5 years old, and lived in a small village called Kalaallit, which is the place where my dad was born, and 4 generations of my dad's side of the family grew up in this small village. It was once the most populous place in Greenland up until the 40s. I think that there was up to 700 people living there, which was a very large settlement at the time.
But by your time, it was more like 40 in the winter and 70 in the summer. Just give us
Correct.
a sense of the kind of conditions of life there. You, as I understand it, the town was reliant on one diesel generator.
Yes. So it's very remote. It's kind of in this small bay that is directly facing out towards the ocean, and it's often used as a shelter for people crossing this big fjord that we're looking out on, because storms come in from the ocean, and people will take shelter in Kalaallit to get away from big waves. And we had a diesel generator that ran I think 4 or 5 hours a day, and gave us electricity, and then otherwise we didn't, and it was just a different type of life, and I still feel very, very connected to that village. It kind of feels like the seat of my soul in a way, because so many of my ancestors come from there, and it's one of the most beautiful places on earth.
And as I understand it, part of the time you worked as a shepherd?
I did. South Greenland, there we have a lot of shepherds. And it's one way of life that people will have several hundred sheep, and you let them out in the spring and they walk around freely, and then you gather them in the fall, which takes several days to do, usually on horseback or on ATV. And there were lots of sheep in Kalaallit. There was an old couple that lived there that had sheep, and they weren't that old at that time, but still an old couple, and there were just sheep walking around everywhere. Sometimes there weren't really any other kids in the village, depending on who was there for that period. So I would kind of befriend sheep and play with sheep rather than humans. And I don't know if that's a part of why I am the way I am today, but sheep have always played a big part of my life, and it's my favorite kind of meat to eat. Also, is Greenlandic lamb. We had a lot of that.
So another big part of your life was music. It was in the family, right? Both your father and your grandfather.
Yeah, my father is an accordion player and quite well known in Greenland, and has been for a long time. He used to play with Rasmus Lybert, which is a kind of, I would call him Greenland's Bob Dylan. very famous singer-songwriter that my dad did some records with back in the 80s and played with him. He also has been, he plays traditional Greenlandic polka on the accordion. So at parties and gatherings, or the shepherds have a yearly summer party, and they'll dance traditional Greenlandic dances to the accordion polka, and my dad plays the accordion and is well known for that. My grandfather was an organist in church and wrote a lot of hymns that are in the book of sort of Greenlandic book of hymns in church. And his brother also was Augurlunge, which was a famous Greenlandic politician who was the first Greenlandic member of Danish parliament, and unfortunately sank with Hans Hedtoft, who it was a ship kind of like Titanic. It was called Unsinkable, and it sank on its maiden voyage from Greenland to Denmark. So I have he was also a composer and wrote many famous Greenlandic songs.
And somehow you wound up back in Copenhagen, right? At some point.
Yeah, well, my family moved back to Denmark after a few years, and I was not in Copenhagen. We went back to Holstebro in Jutland, which is a small town of about 30,000 people. And then my parents unfortunately got divorced, and my father moved back to Greenland, which was very difficult for me. I was very close to my father, and very I always felt very Greenlandic. So having him move away and not being able to see him or talk to him was very difficult, and also something that has shaped who I am and shaped my music. He's a very lively kind of center of the party type guy, and he also is a complex person who has many kids with many women, and so yeah, it was. I was kind of back and forth between Greenland and Denmark for a while, and a lot of people have the same type of fate as me, although not very many ended up living in the States like I did.
But somehow or other, you discovered your own voice as a singer, I think in church choirs, but also gradually discovering the music of maybe Jimi Hendrix, The Doors, Simon and Garfunkel. Say a little bit about that kind of musical awakening and how and where it happened.
Yeah, I started, I think the first single I ever owned myself was I Just Called to Say I Love You by Stevie Wonder. I got a small little vinyl single, and I listened to it so much and absolutely loved that piece of music. And then when I was, after I got back from Greenland when I was 9, I started in a church choir and was a soprano, and we did some touring in the UK and sang in the British churches over there. And really, I got to love singing. And my uncle in Denmark introduced me to Jimi Hendrix, and I really loved listening to his music. My mom was very into Bruce Springsteen and Jim Croce and things like that. Played them at home all the time. So I listened to that kind of acoustic guitar-based music very much, and just I don't know. There was something special about the way a guitar made me feel. And then when I was 13, I started practicing guitar myself, and the first song I think I learned was Blackbird, the Beatles song Blackbird, and played it all the time and couldn't stop playing. And about 15, started writing some of my own songs, joined a cover band, played a bunch of covers, and played around Denmark as a singer in a cover band also. But it wasn't until I kind of moved to Copenhagen when I was 19 or 20, after I finished school. I started playing these open mics around Copenhagen, doing my own original music more, and met this American dude called Brett Perkins from LA, who had moved to Copenhagen because of Girl, and he heard my music and really liked it and set up a tour for me in the U.S. Went to Nashville first and met my first manager, Larry Schell, there. And then went to L.A. after that and met the guy, Matt Forger, who produced my first album. And also on that first trip, met the woman who is now my wife. So it was a very consequential very first visit to the U.S.
It was eventful, yeah. So we want to hear, first of all, I've been listening to a lot of your songs today. I think Deep Snow is my favorite Simon Lynch album, but there's a song you want to play today called The Future. Why don't you set that up and play it for us?
Yeah, it's the title track of my first album, and it feels relevant to the time. It's a song about being positive and creating the kind of future that we want. I have traveled to the future, and I like what I saw. I saw the mountains and the rivers and the beauty of us all. 'Cause if we want to break free, we can. If we want to break free, we can. And if we want to play music, do it now. And praise the moon, the mountains, and the sun. Yeah, praise the moon, the mountains, and the sun. I have traveled to the future, 'cause I built a time machine. 1,000 buttons and just one seat, but I'll take you if you want. 'Cause if you want to break free, you can. And if you want to be free, you can. And if you want to play music, do it now. And praise the moon, the mountains, and the sun. Yeah, praise the moon, the mountains, and the sun. I have built in my backyard a shed full of love, and I'll go there when I need to remember where I went. 'Cause if I want to break free, I can. And if I need to make a change, I can. And if I want to play music, I'll do it now. And I'll praise the moon, the mountains, and the sun. I'll praise the moon, the mountains, and the sun. No praise everybody who dares to be kind to their neighbor. Oh, and praise all the children, and praise all their parents too. Oh, praise the moon and the sun. Oh, praise all of us. Yeah, praise the moon, the mountains, and the sun.
Well, Simon Lynch, that was beautiful. There should be a large crowd applauding here. There's just me at the moment. But, and, you know, I mean, I did spend a good portion of today listening to a lot of your music. Not all of it is all that optimistic, understandably. There is a song called Age of Distraction that begins, cracks are getting deeper, storms are growing bigger. Feels like we're living in the eye of a hurricane. And I hear in that some of the anxiety you might have been feeling even, I mean, obviously we've now reached a moment of apparent crisis in terms of the relations between the U.S. and Greenland and Denmark. But I think probably for a while this has been on your soul, what's going on here in America where you live now, and its implications for the rest of the world. Absolutely.
I mean, that song you mentioned was written during Trump's first term, and I was having a really hard time, and I'm having a really hard time now. It's I'm a really sensitive person, and I can't really handle paying attention too much to everything all the time because it's such a constant barrage of crazy news. But the way that I tend to deal with things is I write songs about it, and it kind of helps me organize my thoughts. And I have written a lot of songs that are social commentary, and I don't think it's because I'm particularly political. I just need to say what I need to say to feel okay in my own body. And it's a way to kind of heal myself. And if other people get something out of it also, then, it's a double benefit, I would say. I'm sure that for the people that in Seattle, or I think you're also in New Orleans right now as we're speaking, you're the only person from Greenland that probably most people in your immediate circle or just people that you meet in the world of music know. I'm sure they have a lot of questions for you, a lot of comments for you. It's probably a little exhausting having to answer the same questions over and over again. But, before we run out of time, what would you want? I think, Americans tend not to know very much about the rest of the world. And to the extent that they know anything about the rest of the world, they know less about Greenland. What would you want to say to somebody who just didn't know anything about this country other than what they're reading in the headlines right now? If you wanted to sort of tell them the story of being from Greenland, living there, and what you wish they knew and understood, what would that be? First of all, Greenland does not have any interest in being American. Greenlandic people do not want to be Americans at all. And we are a very proud and very strong people that have survived for centuries in one of the most harsh environments on Earth. And that the harshness of nature is reflected in the gentleness of our spirit. And if you come to Greenland, you will experience how kind and thoughtful people are. People will always give you the best they have, even if they can't really afford it, because that's part of our culture. And
go ahead.
I'm sorry, I'm getting a little bit emotional.
I get that. Yeah.
People are very determined to be independent, and we've been fighting for a long time to be independent. So having this new threat from a country the size of America is extremely overwhelming, and is so frightening to me, even though I don't live in Greenland. But my father and my sister, my family and my friends in Greenland are all really, really scared and very disturbed. People aren't sleeping. People aren't having anxiety attacks. And that's the way it is right now in Greenland. It's like a living nightmare, to be honest, to be experiencing this. Greenland is a beautiful country, and I feel like one of the last truly pure places on Earth. Now I haven't been everywhere, of course, but it is a place of stunning natural beauty where people live in harmony with nature, and it needs to be preserved and it needs to be protected.
I can't imagine it being more beautifully and wrenchingly put. You did a wonderful job with that. And Simon Lynch, it's been so wonderful to talk to you. I want to encourage people to discover Simon's music. It's on your streaming services. His last name is spelled Lynge. And so singer-songwriter Simon Lynch, thank you for your time today. Thank you for your honesty and for your sharing. And we're going to end the show with another one of your songs.
Thank you very much.
Our lives, something isn't working. Kids are suicidal. Let's fall in love with Mother Nature again.